The mystery in the commissar's pocket. Picture the year 1926. Soviet Russia, a country that hasn't yet recovered from the wounds of the Civil War, but is already looking to the future with iron resolve. A strange object begins to appear in the offices of the Lubyanka, in the secretariats of party bosses, in the leather holsters of the high command of the Red Army. It doesn't look like the rough, reliable Nagant. It's elegant, almost miniature, gleaming with blued steel. This isn't just a weapon. It's a pass into the major leagues. It's a symbol. It is the Korovin pistol, or simply the TK. Have you ever thought that an item in your pocket could speak louder about you than any words? Well, the TK was exactly that kind of talking item. Its owner was not an ordinary soldier. He was a representative of the new elite. He had weight. He was under protection. This pistol wasn't for the trenches. It was for cabinet battles and covert operations. But is it really that simple? Why was the first Soviet self-loading pistol so helpless in real combat? Why was it created not for war, but for status? This is a story not so much about a weapon, but about a country desperately wanting to prove to the world and to itself that it could do anything. On its own, this is the story of technological sovereignty, which in those days was called independence from the capitalist West. You and I will go through the entire journey. From the blueprints in Tula to the pockets of generals, from glorious parades to tragic suicides and encirclements. We'll take it apart, piece by piece, compare it to legendary Walthers and Brownings, and I'll tell you why the TK, despite all its shortcomings, became a true icon of its era. Buckle up. Let's go. Chapter 1. A request from the shadows. Why did Dynamo order a pocket pistol? Let's start from the very beginning. Who was the customer? Officially, the All-Union Physical Culture and Sports Society Dynamo. Sounds almost innocent, right? As if the pistol was needed for shooting competitions. But you and I understand that behind this name was a powerful structure. The GPU, the predecessor of the NKVD and the KGB. These were the Chekists, the security forces. People whose work involved risk, secrets, and the need to operate covertly. In 1925, the country was a troubled place. Banditry, remnants of the white movement, espionage. For a GPU operative working undercover, carrying a bulky Nagant revolver was a death sentence. It gave them away instantly. They needed a compact, easily concealable weapon for self-defense in a critical situation. But, and this is the key point, the order wasn't just utilitarian. It was political, economic, and historical context. The birth of a power in a ring of enemies. To understand the scale, let's mentally transport ourselves to that era. Young Soviet Russia was in international isolation. It was considered a utopian experiment that was about to collapse. There was no developed domestic school of weapon design, like in Belgium or Germany. Yes, there were talented masters, but there was no system. Foreign dependency. Before the revolution, Russia purchased enormous amounts of weapons from abroad. Even the Nagants were produced under a Belgian license. Now, when the Iron Curtain had fallen and relations with former allies had soured, it was necessary to establish domestic production of everything, from machine tools to cartridges. The course for industrialization. The party took a course for accelerated industrialization. The slogan, catch up and overtake, wasn't just empty words. It was a matter of survival. Creating the first Soviet self-loading pistol was a symbol of success, just like launching the first tractor or the first hydroelectric power station. It was a demonstration of technological capability. Look, world, we're not just stuck with Nagants from 1917. We can make our own modern, self-loading weapons. This is precisely why the caliber chosen wasn't some powerful one, but 6.35mm Browning, 6.35 x 16 SR. This was a civilian, European cartridge. A pistol, for it wasn't considered a frontline weapon. Its task was work at short distances, self-defense. Perfect for an operative in civilian clothes or for a party official who could carry it in the inner pocket of his tunic. So when Dynamo placed the order, it was saying, we need a compact pistol. But the party heard, we need a symbol of a new, technologically independent Russia. And this symbol was to be born in Tula. Chapter 2. Sergei Korovin. the genius who seized the moment. The executor was a man with a unique background, Sergei Alexandrovich Korovin. Now, this is someone they should make movies about. Imagine a Russian engineer who, before the revolution, managed to work at the famous Belgian factory FN, Fabrique Nationale, the very one that produced the legendary pistols of John Moses Browning. Korovin knew firsthand how the advanced European weapons industry worked. He absorbed the principles of reliability, ergonomics, and manufacturability. He saw how those very Brownings, considered the gold standard, were created, and so he returned to Russia, to Tula, the epicenter of domestic arms production. His task was titanic, to create from scratch something that had never existed in the country before, a self-loading pistol, and not to blindly copy a Western model, which would have been easier, but to create their own Soviet one. Genius analysis. Why the blowback system? Korovin's design is genius in its simplicity. He chose an automatic operation system based on blowback. What does that mean, you ask? Let me explain in simple terms. Imagine the pistol's barrel is rigidly fixed in the frame. The bolt, the top part that moves back and forth, isn't locked to anything. It's simply pressed against the breech end of the barrel by a powerful spring. When you pull the trigger, a shot is fired. The powder gases push the bullet forward through the barrel, but according to Newton's law, they push the cartridge case backward with equal force. This case, resting against the bolt, forces it to recoil, compressing the spring. The bolt extracts and ejects the spent cartridge case. The spring decompresses and pushes it forward, feeding a new cartridge from the magazine. Why is this genius for the TK? Simplicity. Fewer parts, fewer complex mechanisms. Only 31 parts in total. This means the pistol is cheaper to produce, more reliable. There's almost nothing to break, and easier to maintain in the field. Perfect for a weak cartridge. The 6.35mm Browning cartridge has relatively low power. The energy of its recoil is just enough to move the heavy bolt. If the cartridge had been more powerful, like the future TT's 7.62mm, the bolt would fly back at such a speed that the pistol would become uncontrollable and the design wouldn't withstand it. There you have it, the Korovin compromise. Conscious and brilliant. He created a weapon perfectly suited for a specific task and a specific cartridge. No more, but no less. By 1926, just a year after the order, the Tula Arms Plant, TOZ, began mass production. Can you imagine the pace? From blueprint to assembly line, an instant by the standards of weapons production. Isn't that proof that the system, for all its flaws, could mobilize and solve strategic tasks? Chapter 3. The birth of a status symbol. The cabinet pistol of the new elite. And so our TK rolled off the assembly line. Handsome, well-proportioned, with wooden, or later, plastic grip panels. But what happens next? This is where it gets really interesting. Its fate was determined not by its ballistic characteristics, but by the political and social realities of the young Soviet state. Formally, it was civilian. But in a country where private gun ownership quickly faded away, civilian meant for the chosen few. The TK became a tool for forming a new hierarchy. Who received it? Let's make a list. High-ranking party and state officials. Regional committee secretaries, people's commissars. For them, the TK was like an expensive watch or official MK car, an attribute of power. NKVD employees, primarily management and operatives working undercover. Senior command staff of the Red Army. Army and Corps commanders. For a frontline commander, it was useless, but for a general at headquarters, just a thing. Stakhanovites and leading industrial workers. This is especially telling. The TK became a war weapon. It was presented for labor feats along with medals. Imagine, a worker overfulfills the plan, and he is given not just a certificate, but a personal weapon. This was a powerful ideological move. It blurred the line between labor and defense, between a worker and a warrior. The owner of the TK felt part of the common cause, part of the elite of socialist builders. Thus, the TK very quickly transformed from a means of self-defense into a status accessory. It was carried not because an attack was expected on every corner, but because it was a mark of distinction. I'm one of us. I'm important. I'm under the protection of the system. And here we come to the main contradiction of the TK. Its ergonomics and safety. You remember I talked about the simple design? There's a price for everything. The TK did not have a double-action trigger. What does that mean? After you inserted the magazine, you had to manually retract and release the bolt-to-chamber round. But that's only half the battle. The firing mechanism was single action. This means that before the first shot, you had to use your thumb to cock the hammer, that little protruding pin at the back. Only after that could you fire. Now imagine a critical situation. You're being attacked. You have a split second to draw your pistol and fire. But you can't do it immediately. You need both hands, one to hold the pistol, the other to cock the hammer. Those are moments you don't have. Compare this to the German Walther PP, which appeared a little later in 1929. It had a double-action trigger. This means it was enough to simply pull the trigger. It would be heavy, but the hammer would cock and a shot would fire. This is a colossal advantage in a fleeting skirmish. Moreover, the TK had only one, a manual safety lever. There were no automatic safeties blocking the firing pin in case of a drop. Carrying it with a round in the chamber was fraught with an accidental discharge. Therefore, many carried it with an empty chamber, and in a stressful situation, you not only had to cock the hammer, but also disengage the safety. So it turns out that the real combat value of the TK as a weapon of instant response was extremely low. It was a weapon for a calm, predictable environment where you had time to prepare. Perfect for an office. Hence its nickname, the Cabinet Pistol. Chapter 4. The Comparative Battle of the Titans. The TK versus the world. To understand the TK's place in history, let's step outside the USSR and see what was happening in the world. This will be brutal, but honest. I've prepared a mental table for you, but we'll voice it. Opponent number 1, Browning Model 1906, Baby Browning. Caliber, the same, 635. Browning's advantages. It was shorter, lighter, more elegant. A true pocket classic. It was easy to hide in a vest pocket. Its production had been perfected for decades. TK's advantages. Magazine capacity. The Browning held only 6 rounds, the Korovin 8. And that's it. In all other parameters for concealed carry, the Belgian was better. Opponent number 2, Walther PP/PPK, Germany, late 20s. Caliber, 765mm, .32 ACP. Already more powerful. Walther's advantages. This was a breakthrough. Double-action trigger. A perfect safety system allowing the pistol to be carried safely with a round in the chamber. It was more ergonomic, more comfortable in the hand. It was a pistol for professionals for whom every second counted. TK's advantages. Price. Simplicity of production. For the owner, there were no advantages left. The Walther was objectively a more advanced and safer weapon. Opponent number 3. Internal, the experimental pistol of Prylutsky. There was another Soviet project. Sergei Alexandrovich Prylutsky proposed a pistol for the more powerful 7.65mm Browning cartridge. And he used not a simple blowback, but a much more complex and modern system. Short recoil operation based on the Browning pattern, like in the famous Colt M1911. This provided better ballistics and accuracy. So why was the TK chosen over Prylutsky's? Manufacturability. Korovin's design was simpler and cheaper for mass production. The country needed a symbol here and now, not a promising but raw development. Compliance with the terms of reference. The order was for a 6.35mm cartridge. Korovin executed it brilliantly. Prylutsky went further, but his pistol was more complex and, likely, more expensive. So the choice in favor of the TK was logical from the point of view of immediate tasks. Fast, cheap, many. But it also set back the Soviet school of pistol design by several years compared to the German one. Chapter 5. The Harsh Truth of War. The TK as a weapon of last resort. The year 1941 arrives. The Great Patriotic War. Everything the TK was created for, offices, statuses, concealed carry, collapses under the roar of bombings, and the rumble of tank engines. War puts everything in its place, stripping the gilding from any, even the most beautiful, symbols. At the front, there is a catastrophic shortage of weapons. Everything is used: old nagants, captured Lugers, hunting rifles. The TKs are taken from the warehouses. They are issued to officers, SMERSH employees, and sometimes even to scouts. And here its shortcomings manifest themselves in full, tragic measure. The weak 6.35mm cartridge was useless against an enemy in winter clothing, even at close range. The lack of a double-action trigger made it almost useless in close combat, in a trench where split seconds decide everything. The ergonomic but slippery grip was hard to hold in a sweaty or frostbitten hand. The TK became a weapon of desperation, a weapon of last resort. Its value in war was reduced to one: the darkest function, the ability to avoid capture. The most famous and poignant episode is associated with Lieutenant General Mikhail Grigorievich Efremov. In the spring of 1942, his 33rd Army was encircled near Vyazma. The fighting was desperate. A breakout failed. The wounded general, not wanting to be captured and humiliated, shot himself. According to one version, the weapon he used for the final shot was precisely the TK pistol. This act, worthy and tragic, forever sealed the TK's reputation as a combat weapon. It finally moved into the category of symbols. But symbols of what? Not of power and status, but of sacrifice and the last choice of a Russian officer. This is a bitter but important page in its biography. Chapter 6: Legacy and Paradoxes. Was the TK a failure? So what were we left with? Was the TK an unsuccessful, useless pistol? I categorically disagree with that assessment. That's too simplistic a view that considers a weapon only through the prism of its killing power. Let's figure it out. Arguments for why it was a success. Technological sovereignty. The TK was the first Soviet self-loading pistol. It paved the way. Without its production experience, there would have been no formidable TT, Tula, Tokarev, nor the legendary PM, Makarov pistol. It was that very ground zero from which the long journey began. Symbolic success. It fulfilled its political mission 100%. It became a visible, tangible proof that the USSR could create modern things. It was an object of pride for the new elite. Perfect compliance with the terms of reference. Remember the Dynamo order? A compact pistol for concealed carry under the 6.35mm cartridge. Korovin made exactly that, and he did it well. We judge it from today's standpoint, demanding from it qualities that were never originally intended for it. Arguments against why it was a failure. Tactical irrelevance. Real life, especially war, showed that its tactical niches, cabinet and concealed carry, were very narrow. In a real firefight, it was inferior to almost all modern analogs. Stifling progress. The choice in favor of Korovin's simple and cheap design possibly slowed down the development of more complex and promising systems, like Prylutsky's, for several years. My opinion, as someone who has studied tons of information, the TK is neither a failure nor a triumph. It is a paradox. It is a mirror reflecting all the contradictions of the young Soviet Union. Giant ambitions and forced technological compromises. The drive for independence and the necessity of catching up. The creation of an elite and the harsh truth of a mass society. It was needed precisely at that moment, precisely in that form. It was a stepping stone. And the value of a stepping stone is not in how beautiful it is, but in the fact that you can't rise higher without it. Epilogue. History's lessons that hit home today. And now, my friend, the most important part. Why do we dig so deep into this story? Not just for the sake of an old pistol. Because the history of the TK is not a lesson from the past. It is repeating itself right now, before our eyes. The concept of technological sovereignty, which in the 1920s was spoken of as independence from the West, is more relevant today than ever. Modern Russia once again faces a challenge to create its own technologies, its own machine tools, its own microchips, its own software. And the dilemma is the same. What is more important? To quickly make a simple and functional analog, like the TK, to cover basic needs and show that we can, or to spend years and resources on developing a breakthrough, competitive product, like the unrealized Prylutsky pistol, that can compete on equal terms with Western models? The history of the TK teaches us that the first path is fast and symbolically important. It boosts morale and creates an image of strength. But it is also fraught with dependence on a catching-up model of development. The Korovin pistol was a great symbol, but symbols win on parade grounds. Wars are won by equipment that works not in ideal conditions, but in the harshest ones. Wars are won not by status, but by real effectiveness. So let's learn a lesson. Let's remember that behind every object, behind every technology, there's a choice that determines the future. The TK is our history, our pride, and our warning. That's all. I hope this journey was as exciting for you as it was for me. This topic is infinitely deep, so I'm waiting for your thoughts, your objections, your additions in the comments. Let's discuss it like true experts. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We have many more such detailed breakdowns of legendary weapons and more to come. Like if you found it interesting, and share with friends who love history with a twist. See you.